This piece of steel that I'm using for this knife is some of the remaining 144 layer Damascus that I made and like forge welded in my other Damascus video of making a Damascus chef knife. Here I'm using the press to kind of squeeze in the tip, which I'm using the drawing dies for, and it didn't leave the hard shoulders like the flat dies do. You can see that fish mouth starting to form at the tip where the corners are compressing, like holding in on the center. I don't really care about it too much because I'm not going to forge this completely to shape. I'll still have like the blade isolated, the finger well isolated, handle kind of curved, but not forging it too close and not squeezing that tip too much is really going to preserve the pattern and not have it get too fine or distorted in too many areas. That's about all the forging I'm going to be doing, to shape at least. Here I'm using the drawing dies to get it down to the thickness I want, so I don't have to do much grinding later. It also draws it out to the proper length so I can make the knife that I want to make out of it. Here I'm using the flat dies just to flatten all those peaks from the drawing dies. Sets it up for easier grinding, you know, less material to remove later. What I'm doing here is just I'm going to cut off the fish mouth, get the tip a little bit profiled before I start grinding on the belt sander. This is just some sped up footage of me profiling the knife. I like it sped up because it looks cool just seeing the knife come to shape pretty quickly. I left it wider everywhere like I was saying, just so if there was cold shuts anywhere along the edges, I would have a pretty good chance of grinding it away and getting to good steel. I didn't have any cold shuts. I'm very confident in my forge welding, but just in case, I like to leave that extra. I'm not going to grind the bevels after this. I'm just going to normalize, do all my normalizing cycles, and then quench it as is. So I'll do all my grinding afterwards. Just because it's a small knife, I don't want to risk warping or anything. I just want to stay straight. And since it's so small, it's not really an issue to grind it in the hardened state. If it was a larger knife, I wouldn't do it this way. That's why I normally grind bevels before quenching. Now that the knife is all heat treated, tempered, I'm going to be removing all this scale, well not all of it, but a good portion of it, using the surface grinding attachment for my belt sander. I'm just taking light passes so it doesn't overheat the blade and ruin my temper. Then what I'm showing you now is the thickness, which I'm going to be at the end of the tang. Right here I'm going to taper the tang using the same attachment. It's really cool. It's the platen part of it can be angled so that you can taper the tang, and it's pretty much the same process, just light passes. But what you see is I'm starting off with a high grit, well, not a low grit, I mean, but the grit is high, so it leaves an uneven finish. What I end up going up to is about 220 grit, and it makes a pretty definitive stopping point where you can have the taper only start from wherever you want and go down to the tang, so it makes a perfectly flat tang. This is coming off the surface grinding attachment, and I'll just be showing you how thin it got. Just to show how accurate that Ameribrake grinder is, the surface grinding attachment, you can see at the very tip where this is the skinniest, it's 0.0625, which is a 1/16 of an inch, and that's exactly, you just do the math, but that's exactly what I wanted to end up with, and it just gets it there perfect as long as you do the math right. I've definitely had times where I put a number in wrong. It can totally throw it off, but it is extremely accurate at getting the taper, whatever number you want. You just pick the number you want, put it in the formula, and you get your shim thickness, and it makes it perfect every single time. Now I'm going to start grinding in the false edge. I do that before I grind my primary bevels, because when I grind the primary bevels, it will kind of fade the false edge up and taper it with the primary bevel. You can see I'm just taking like very light bumps onto the belt sander so I don't overheat my blade and ruin all my tempering. I also say it's important that I do like even grinding. Here you can see I'm just going at a steep angle to get to the center line, but I'm taking the same amount of material off both sides. I won't grind on one side too long, just because if you were to grind the bevels all the way, you could risk it warping since it's already hardened. Removing material from one side could make it, spring over. So the primary bevels are pretty much fully ground, except the edge right now is about 1 millimeter thick. But I'm going to be convexing this to about 1/64 of an inch, or about 0.3 millimeters, and I'll be convexing it from about 1/4 of the blade. So to the false edge, it's about 28 millimeters. So the way I'm gonna do it is just go to about 7 millimeters, so it's about 1/4, and I can kind of just scratch on a line. Kind of hard to tell, but you can kind of see that line. I'll just grind basically a pretty much flat bevel from there to the edge, getting it to the thickness I want, and then I'll use the slack belt and without the platen, and just like smooth it over, round over the hard flat, and then have it be more of a continuous drop to very skinny edge, which about 0.3 millimeters is pretty skinny. That's about it. While I'm hand sanding this knife, I'm gonna point some things out about it, just to talk about the knife some. This line up here where the primary bevel is meeting the cheek, the flat part, you can see it's really high, and I'm kind of just sanding it out. I'm gonna do it on both sides, but I'm doing that because it was so high that there was not much of a distinction between the flat and the bevel, so it's just going to look better rounded. But I ground it so high because I didn't want a lot of the flat part, and I don't want a lot of the flat part because it's Damascus, and Damascus is made with layers of steel, say like one layer, another, just stacked perfectly on top of each other. So what you end up with is, like, on the flats, anywhere where it's just the surface level, you have the least amount of layers being revealed. If everything was done perfect, it would actually only be one layer on top, but that never happens. You always have some variation and loss to scale and hammer marks, but it's just always the case that the deeper you grind into it, you'll reveal more of the pattern. So the higher the grind is, the more you can see the pattern, or it's just a cooler pattern. I'm on 320 grit. That's what I just dropped, but I'm gonna sand it to 600, because really anything less than maybe even around like 400 you could get away with it, but less than that, like if you're going to like 320 or something, like if I were to stop now, the sanding lines are so coarse that the acid will intensify the sand lines, and if you go too fine, like say over 1,000 or like a mirror polish, it's just such a fine surface that the acid can't really etch as deep. So I go with about 600, because it ends up coming out where I think it completely erases the sand lines to where you can't see them, but it leaves a very deep etch, and I like the textural feel of Damascus. I don't like it where it's just a surface finish. I like it where you can run your nail on it and feel the layers. Also take this time to do a hardness test while the tank's exposed, so I don't scratch up the blade later. But what I have are these files that are, the metal is tested to where this file's at 60 HRC, so if it scratches the file, if the file scratches the knife, then you know the knife is below 60 HRC. If it skates, then it's above, and it comes with a bunch of files so that you can kind of just get a range of what your knife's HRC is. But this is 60, and it's just skating. I'll do the 65, which hopefully my knife isn't 65 HRC, because that would be too hard. But yeah, this is what it just bites into it. And kind of what that shows is my knife is between 60 and 65 HRC. Really, I know it should be, you know, around 61, 62, just because of the way I heat treated it and tempered it. But I don't have a rock weld tester, so that's as accurate as I can get. But really, I have the heat treating oven, which holds temperatures exactly, you know, it's quenched at exact temperatures, it's tempered. I theoretically know the hardness, but the files just kind of confirm it's in that range, which is good for this knife. What you'll see when the knife comes out of the acid is you'll see some white spots up near the flats. That's just some decarb. I just had to sand it out and continue my etching. Not really much of a problem though. This is really all I'm going to show for the handle pre-glue up. I didn't really do much. I left it very blocky. You can see I drilled the holes, but this is just grinding in the front of the handle, and I just kind of ground this side to a shape I like, and I use it as a template for the other side, where now you can see I'm sanding it. And again, this is a part of the knife here that you can't get to once it's all glued up. So I take the time and sand it to, this time I went to 1000 grit, just so that it's already finished how I like before gluing it. Here you can see I left it very blocky, not much that you missed before gluing it. My process for the handles is profiling first. So I just kind of grind it down to the tang all around the knife before I start shaping it at all. Here you can see I'm done profiling it, and I'm just getting the scales down to the thickness I want. And once I get it down to the thickness, you can see it's took forever because that micarta is really hard. But now that it's down to thickness, you can see you might not be able to see, but I did draw a bunch of lines on there. And basically I draw the lines from like fixed points on the blade, like the tang or the pins, and I replicate them evenly on both sides so that I can put on a bunch of facets all over the handle and make the scales symmetrical before I blend it all together, which is what I'm doing now without the flatten. I don't really care about you know, the lines anymore. Once I start rounding it, you can see I just use my fingers and touch it after every few passes, and as long as it feels good, that's even enough for me. I don't normally show this part, but this is how I put the pinch grip on, and it's a pretty, I would say, delicate process because you push it into that little round wheel attachment thing, and kind of get one shot with it, and if you overdo it too much, there's no going back. Here's the finished knife. You can see I also got these facets in here that I didn't show me putting in, but I like them. They're pretty nice. It feels nice. Normally, or not normally, but sometimes I'll do it straight to where it's a consistent arc all the way across, but for this one I was kind of going for, you know, just feeling it, what felt better. And when I was kind of just holding it, you know, like this, how I think just the most stabby, I guess, feels nice. My finger kind of curls back, so I ground it, you know, deeper over here, and it also leaves more room for the pinch grip because I'm not grinding into it as much. So definitely like that part of it. Just feels nicer in the hand, and it's also talking about the feel. It's heavier than the knives I've made like this with wood handles, just because this micarta is much heavier than the wood. But you can see I got the taper tang, which really reduces the weight. It makes it feel better. I was going to etch this, like you can see it's shiny, but when I did a test etch, it just kind of looked like nothing. It was so fine that it maybe looked like some weird sanding lines, and it was just real muddy, so I went with the clean steel. It just looks better, in my opinion. Talking about the Damascus, you can see these waves on the blade that almost look like ladder pattern. It's not ladder pattern, though. It is random. Those are just from the drawing dies on my press, where that's where it just got pinched and kind of put that in there. It's still really cool though. And it's got like this random dark vein on this side that I really like. Both sides are pretty unique, which I think is cool. On the false edge, it's so tight, you know, in person you can see it, but you can see the waviness to it, and that gives you an idea. Like, this is ground and exposed steel. It looked even denser on the spine just because this is 144 layers, so it's a lot of layers and it's really fine. But I'll have some sharpness tests where I show like some hair whittling, and then maybe some shots of the knife, you know, at the end, and that's the end of this video. Couldn't get the camera to focus real good, but you can see for this shot the edge is splitting the hair and cuts it off, and then this one ended up a little better. It kind of just hooked it and popped the hair. I had a few that I couldn't get where it was actually whittling it, but couldn't get those shots.